Have you ever made a financial decision that you've been replaying in your head for years and wondering what life would look like if you'd just done it differently? By the end of this episode, you will understand why financial regret is one of the heaviest things a person can carry and have a practical way to start putting it down. You'll walk away knowing that financial mistakes do not define your future, that regret is a normal human experience, and with one practical tool to start moving forward instead of looking back. Wealth building is not just about numbers, it's about decision making, emotional resilience, and the ability to learn from mistakes and keep moving forward. A trader who was paralyzed by past financial decision, this episode directly addresses that paralysis. In 1995, I bought a property. In 1999, I sold it for essentially no profit. Looking back now, if I'd simply held on to it, I would have made more than four times my money over the next decade. I've replayed that decision in my head for years. I've asked myself, why did I do that? What was I thinking? How different would things have been today? Today, we're going to talk about something most finance podcasts never discuss: financial grief. Because making a financial mistake is one thing, carrying it for 25 years is something else entirely differently. In 1995, my wife and I bought our first home, a two-bedroom house in Mandurah for $80,000. We'd been married for 2 years. We were proud of it. We did some painting, we freshened it up, we made it ours. Then in 1996, we moved to the Pilbara for work and became accidental landlords. The rent was coming in, the property was ticking along. The managing agent would call me every month or so. Usually nothing serious, just something that needed to be sorted out. But to my 20-year-old something mind, that phone call was unbearable. I did not want to deal with it. I did not want the hassle. So in 1999, we sold it. We got back roughly what we paid for it, $80,000. No profit, no loss. Clean break. No more phone calls. We moved overseas in the years 2000 and stayed there for 9 years. When we came back to Australia in 2009, I looked up that property out of curiosity and it was on the market for just over $400,000. I had traded $320,000 in equity to avoid a phone call every month or so. I have thought about that almost every year since. My guest today is Jeremy Greening, coach, pastor, and founder of Valleys to Victory. Jeremy has spent more than 2 decades helping people navigate grief and loss, difficult seasons, and the challenge of moving forward when life has not gone the way they planned. I reached out to Jeremy because I wanted to understand something I've carried for a long time, and I think a lot of you carried something similar. Welcome to the podcast, Jeremy.
Thanks, David. Pleasure to be here and to have a chat and hopefully help a few of your listeners as well.
That's great. How do we get to know each other, Jeremy? Well, originally we met at an AI conference in Thailand, and it turns out we both started a podcast and we're collaborating here today.
Yep, it was an exciting event we attended together and met each other in Thailand, and now we're going on this journey of podcasting and learning all about that, and it's just another exciting way to reach people that you know that resonate with what it is that we carry and what we can share. And I think it's great what you're doing with your podcast and helping tradies. So, looking forward to today's call.
Yeah, always looking forward to learning. Was always something good to learn.
Mm.
Jeremy, most people think of grief as something you feel when someone dies, but can people grieve things that never happened, opportunities missed, decisions they cannot undo?
Look, absolutely. In fact, I'd say the truth is many people spend more time grieving things that never actually happened than things that actually did. Most people think grief is only about death. We attach grief to it, that experience. But the truth is, grief is really about loss. And any time there's a gap between, I guess, what we hoped for and what we dreamed of and what actually happened, grief can show up in that space. So that can be the loss of a loved one, of course, but it can also be the loss of, say, a dream, a missed opportunity, a business that never got started, an investment that was sold too early, like you just shared, or a future that we were going to have and now we don't. So I guess what makes it difficult in this space is that those losses are often invisible, so people don't see them. Nobody brings you a meal and gets around you and supports you, and nobody says, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss," because it's not something that's, I guess, something that can be seen. Uh,
Yep.
but inside, you're carrying the weight of a life that you imagined could have been, and a story that never got written. And I see this all the time in the work that I do. You know, people saying things like, "Oh, if only I bought that property," or "If only I started that business," or "If only I invested sooner," or "taken that opportunity." You know, people are internally processing that all the time. And what they're grieving isn't just perhaps the decision that they made, but they're grieving the future that they believe that that decision could have created for them. And because there's no, when there's a death, there's a funeral, right?
Mm.
Or there's like a clear ending point, and then we can
Yep.
work from there. But see, many people that carry that regret for years, a poor decision or something that they wish they didn't do. They carry that for years, sometimes decades, without even realizing that they're actually grieving, because we're not taught this stuff. Where we don't get born with this innate ability to know how to manage grief. So that's why I think this conversation today is really important, and I'm glad you've invited me onto your podcast, because once you can name it, once you can name what it is, that decision, that failure that you have in your eyes, whatever it is, you can actually start to deal with it. And so you can stop telling yourself, "Oh, I'm stupid for that choice," or "I'm weak," or, you begin to understand that you're having a very human response to a loss that mattered to you.
Wow, it's a powerful insight that it's invisible and there's no end point, so you carry it for a long, long time. And then I'd certainly, it's true from my experience.
Mm.
What is actually happening psychologically when someone replays a past decision over and over, sometimes for decades?
I'm going to explain this in a way that's very practical, because when you get to know me, you'll know I'm no textbook guy. I'm not some psychologist guru. So I'm going to make this really simple. But what's actually happening when we replay that event in our mind? The term can be looping. It just keeps going around our brains. But what is actually happening is that our mind is trying to continually solve a problem that it can no longer be solved because it's done.
Wow.
But we go back there and we're thinking and we're thinking, and how could I have done that differently? When we make a decision that leads to a painful outcome, such as, I mean, your example with the property, our brain naturally goes back to review it, because that's a very normal human process. It's trying to learn from the experience so that we don't make the same mistake again. But the problem comes when we move from learning to looping, as I said earlier. Instead of asking, "Well, what can I learn from this?" We start asking, "Well, how could I have prevented this?" And then we replay the conversation over and over again. We replay the decision, we replay the opportunity. It just keeps going around and around in our minds. And we replay the moment where everything could have gone differently but didn't. And because we already know the outcome, because we can't go back and change time, I mean, I'd love to do that, but we can't do that. We judge our past self using the information we didn't actually have at the time. We may have that information now, but we didn't have it then. And that's where people, I think, get stuck in this kind of thing. They're looking backwards with today's knowledge and saying, "Oh, I should have known better." But the truth is, the person making that decision 25 years ago, for example, it's not the person you are today. You didn't have today's experience. You didn't have today's wisdom. You didn't know how the story was going to unfold. So, what happens is the brain keeps revisiting that moment, the looping, to find a different ending, hoping that it's going to turn out differently. But there isn't one, because the decision is over. So, the outcome is done, it's happened. Yet emotionally, we're still standing at the crossroads trying to choose a different
Mm.
path. And that's actually very exhausting. And if we do it long enough, the regret stops being a lesson and it starts to become our identity and who we are. And so instead of saying, "Oh, I made a mistake," we start saying, "Well, I am a mistake." And that's when it becomes
Mm.
quite destructive rather than helpful.
Wow. Okay, that's really powerful insight too. When you hear my story about what I did and the choices I made, what do you actually hear? What's going on beneath the surface for someone carrying that for 25 years?
Well, what I hear in your story uh, is 25 years of carrying a burden that it was never meant to be carried that long. Um, on the surface, it's a property story, and you've shared it today, and that's great that you're being open with your listeners. But underneath, it's a story about self-judgment. What strikes me is that you're not upset because you made a bad decision. We've all made bad decisions. I think every listener could agree with that. But what hurts is that every time you look back, you're measuring yourself against what might have been. You're not just seeing a house that went from 80,000 to, what did you say, 400,000 or whatever it
Yeah.
was. You're seeing opportunities, you're seeing choices, freedoms, possibilities. And every time you revisit the story, you're asking that same question, well, what if? What if I held on to it just a bit longer? And the problem is that what if has no finish line. You're never gonna get an answer out of that. So the mind keeps going back. We talked about the looping, hoping to find peace where peace can never be found.
Wow.
So what I hear is someone who doesn't need a better financial strategy. You just need permission to stop punishing yourself for a decision that you made decades ago, because your lesson has been learned. Let's be honest. You learn a very good lesson out of that. The only question now is whether you're going to keep carrying the choice that you made in the way that you've been carrying it, or are we going to move forward?
Yeah, that's powerful. Like you've heard the expression, I kick myself for a decision I made, and I've kicked myself very, very hard for that decision I made. But I do realize now, with the benefit of time, even though it wasn't my best financial decision, it has changed the way I think about decisions and spurred me to take different actions. So even though I'm not happy with the bad that came out of it, some good come out of it as well, and I can see that. But it's taken me a long time to be able to see the benefit of that good.
Hmm.
In terms of the financial grief you see, do you work with people that have financial grief, and what sort of areas do you see people having financial grief?
Yeah, I do hear financial grief stories all the time. Um, for me, it's interesting because there's a correlation between going through um, grief of a loss of a loved one, the principles that you learn there to help overcome that and move forward, um, are the same principles as financial grief, because you're dealing with the same root cause, which is loss. And so it's more prevalent than you think. So, I mean, I want your listeners to hear this. This isn't just, poor you, you're weak, you're a failure because of what you're experiencing and the emotion that you're carrying. This is actually very common. I think there's a lot of people out there, just like you, David, that, myself included. I've got my own story where I invested in a property up north. I'm in Queensland, up north in Dalby, when the mining boom was happening, and I had big dreams of building a house and selling it and paying off a big chunk of debt, and it was a great plan until the builder was so busy. He couldn't get my home finished in the time frame promised. And by the time he'd finished, the mining boom had sunk, the values dropped, and we actually
Mm.
lost money on that
Oh,
investment as well. So, I mean, I can relate to your listeners and even to your story, David,
yeah,
because I've had my own journey with that and had to, I guess, come to terms with and deal with that in a way that I can move forward without carrying the weight of that decision. I mean, those things are out of my control. There's nothing I could have done differently. And you've got to come to terms with that and not be hard
yeah,
on yourself. So yeah, it's a very
yeah.
prevalent thing, I think, very common, and lots of people, I think, deep below the surface are carrying grief on decisions just like that.
Well, thanks for sharing that story as well. That
Mm,
it's quite personal as well.
mm,
So and I'll take the point that a lot of us have experienced financial regret or financial loss in some way.
mm.
So when someone has experienced that, what motivates them to change? Where do they get to the point where they change from regret to action that moves them, or stops them from being held back? What's
Yeah.
the thing that switches that?
I think regret can be helpful when it teaches you something. That's important. Not regret in what could have been, but regret as in, here's the lesson I've learned, and now I can move forward with this knowledge. See, it becomes harmful. Regret becomes harmful when it starts defining you. Productive regret says, I wish I'd done that differently, so here's what I'll do next time.
Wow.
But then there's destructive regret, which says, I wish I'd done that differently, and now I'll spend the next 10 years beating myself up about it. That's not helpful. One moves you forward, the other keeps you stuck. So a simple question I often ask people is this: is this regret helping you make better decisions today? That's a really solid question to ask yourself. And if the answer is yes, it's probably serving a purpose, and that's a good thing. But if the answer is no, and you're just replaying, looping the story over and over again, then the lesson has probably been learned and the regret has outlived its usefulness. So at that point, you're no longer learning from the past, you're actually living in it. So it's a good question to ask yourself. Have you got destructive regret going on? Because if you do, we need to move from that because it's not helping you.
Wow. I just made a powerful connection in my mind as you were saying that. On the podcast, I talk about good debt and bad debt. And you've just gave an example of good regret and bad regret. And I made the connection because they rhyme. I am that simple, yes. But I think that's a great analogy as well. There's good regret and bad regret. Good regret causes you to learn something and move on and take action.
Mm.
And bad regret stops you in that place and it becomes your identity. So it's important for us to have good regret and bad regret and know the difference. And same with good debt and bad debt and know the difference. And I once heard someone say that if it rhymes, it's true. So maybe that's possible.
Very good.
So if someone's having grief, what's the first step someone takes when they decide they want to stop living in the what if world and building from where they actually are?
Yeah, great question, David, because I'm all about action too. So we need to be taking steps and moving forward. So for me, the first step would be to separate the lesson from the punishment. There needs to be a separation there. See, most people have been carrying both because of whatever decision that they're grieving. So here's a simple exercise that I think that every one of your listeners could do that's in this position that they find themselves carrying grief over a decision or something that happened. Grab a piece of paper, draw a line right down the middle of that piece of paper, and on the left side, I want you to write what this experience taught me, and then make a list of things. And on the right side, how have I been punishing myself? And then be honest. Be honest with yourself. Don't just write down what you think, Jeremy wants you to write down. I want you to be honest with yourself. And maybe the lesson is, think longer term, or maybe it's don't make emotional decisions or get advice before acting. Maybe that's the lesson because those lessons are valuable and I want you to keep those because they're lessons well learned. But if the other side says things like, well, I'm a loser, I ruined my future, I'll never recover from this, you know what? That's not a lesson, that's a punishment. And punishment doesn't help you build wealth. Once you've identified the lesson, I want you to ask yourself one final question. What is one financial decision that I can make this month that reflects what I've learned? That's progress. That's taking a step forward because your future won't be built by changing the decision you made 25 years ago because we can't do that, but it'll be built by the next decision that you make. And so it's important to not get bogged down in the punishment, the regret, the disappointment, but start to take steps forward by analyzing, looking at, and acknowledging the lessons that you've learnt.
Well, there's two powerful things in there that really stand out to me. The first one is writing it down. Now, someone who hates writing and will do anything I can do to avoid writing and chose my career in the hope that it would reduce the amount of writing I'd ever have to do, I would say that in the times when I have actually taken the time to write things down, it's been more effective. It's hard to explain. There's some science behind it. I don't understand it. But if you're listening to this today and you're resisting writing it down, I would say just tip piece of paper. It doesn't have to be neat, doesn't have to be perfect. Just write something down. Just make an effort. And the other thing that Jeremy said is just do one thing. Okay, so you've written your list, you've worked out what you need to do. Just do one thing. You can't do it all at once. Just do one thing.
Yeah.
Can you genuinely forgive yourself for a decision you made 25 years ago, or did you just learn to carry it differently?
Well, I think it's both, to be honest. I think you can genuinely forgive yourself, but that doesn't mean you forget. I think that's important to understand too. There are decisions in my own life that I still wish I'd made differently. I think we've all got decisions like that. I can still feel a little sting when I think about them, but there's a big difference between remembering something and being imprisoned by it. And that's what we're
Wow.
talking about today. We don't want to get stuck in regret. For me, forgiveness isn't saying, well, it didn't matter. It's saying I accept that I can't change it and I can honor the lesson and I can learn from it and I can make better decisions because of it. But I don't have to keep paying for it emotionally for the rest of my life. I don't, that's a choice if I allow that to happen. I think real forgiveness happens when the memory no longer controls your future. You can learn from the past, but you can't let it dictate to your future. You can make better choices moving forward. You can still remember the decision that you made, you just stop letting it define who you are today.
That's awesome. That's really good.
Mm.
A lot of tradies listening right now are carrying something, a property they sold, a good investment they never made, a business they never started. They've been earning good money for years and still feel like they've got it wrong somewhere. What would you say to them if you could say one thing?
If I could say one thing to your listeners, this is what I'd say. Um, Stop measuring the rest of your life by one decision. There you go. That's powerful. Stop. Just stop doing it because we all do it. We've all done it. I want to remind you, this is prevalent. This is common. This isn't just an isolated event in your life. Many people, including tradies, do this. They measure their whole life based on one poor decision. I've met people who have allowed one property or one investment or one missed opportunity to headline their story. And it's only one chapter of the book. See, it's not the whole book. This isn't where your story ends in about one bad decision. The fact that you're still feeling the weight of it, it tells me something important about you. It tells me that you cared about whatever that was. You
Wow.
cared deeply. It tells me you wanted better for yourself and your family, and that's great. That's not weakness. That's actually strength. So what I'd encourage you to do is I want you to stop asking, well, what would my life look like if I'd made a different decision 10 years ago? And I want you to start asking, what's the best decision I can make with what I have now today?
Wow.
Because wealth isn't built by winning every decision. That's impossible. No one's perfect. We're going to make, guess what? Newsflash, we're going to make wrong decisions in the future as well. But what it's built by is making the next good decision and then the next one and then the next one. And it's just progress like that because your future is not ever going to be determined by the opportunity you missed unless you allow it to. It's determined by what you do from this point forward. So, friend, don't get stuck in the chains of regret and allow yourself to learn and move forward and not have your future dictated to by your past.
That's great advice. It's taken me a while, but over time I've learned that it's much better to make a decision and make a wrong decision, and then you can correct it rather than making no decision. I think if I'm understanding you correctly, if you're in that looping phase, you're almost in a indecision phase as well,
Yeah,
where you can't move forward because you can't make the next decision. So make a decision, move forward. If you make a wrong one, make a different one.
that's it. Keep moving forward.
Here is what I want you to take away from today. Every tradie I've ever met is carrying something, a decision they got wrong, an opportunity they missed, a moment where they wished they could go back and change. The weight is real. What Jeremy helped me understand today is that the grief is not a sign that you're weak or stupid. It's a sign that you cared, and he made that point very well. That you want better, and wanting better is exactly the starting point for building a better future. The past does not change, but the next decision you make does. Start there. Jeremy, thank you so much for being on my podcast today. I've really learned a lot, and I'm grateful to have you on. If people want to find out more about you, where can they go to get more information?
Best place to go would be my website. It's Valleys plural, VALLEYS 2, as in TO, not the number, victory, and .com, valleys to victory.com. And there's information about me on there. You can sign up to receive weekly emails from me. I do share on other topics as well, not just grief and loss, but and as I said, any principle that I share around grief and loss of a loved one is very relevant in the financial grief space. It's the same principles, it's just a different loss. So if you want to connect, come along to my website, sign up for a free email. You'll get a copy of a free book chapter that I wrote regarding grief as well as part of that. And we'd love to have you come and visit us. That would be great.
All right. Thanks again for joining me, Jeremy. It's great to have you on the podcast.
My pleasure, David, and all the best to you and all your listeners. Trust today was helpful. And hey, let's just keep moving forward. Let's not get bogged down in our one decision that we're regretting, but let's just dream about all the great decisions that are ahead of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was the podcast from Pay to Wealth for Tradies with David Kennington. More information at tradiesearn.com. That's tradiesearn.com.